Welcome back, my spooky scaries, to another chilling episode of The Final Pod. I'm your host, Ezra Rivers, where I talk all things spooky all the time. And today we're delving into the terrifying world of cheating death and unraveling death design in the Final Destination series, including the highly anticipated new movie, Final Destination Bloodlines. As always, before we start, don't forget to head over to Instagram and follow the show at The Final Pod. Now, let's get into it. For over 2 decades, the Final Destination series has captivated audiences with its spine-tingling premise. From the 2000s debut to the last installment in 2011, each film follows a group of individuals who narrowly escape death due to the protagonist having a premonition, only to realize that fate has a sinister plan in store for them. No matter how they try to evade it, death always finds a way to claim its victims, leaving audiences on the edge of their seats with each gruesome demise. Throughout the series, characters often start off naive, dismissing the string of fatalities as mere accidents until they uncover death's meticulous design. The pattern is very clear. Everyone must meet their end in the order they were meant to, and attempts to cheat death only delay the inevitable, leading to even more horrifying outcomes. Now, I just started my rewatch of the series last night with Final Destination 5. Yes, you're probably like, why the fifth one first? Well, if you've actually seen the movies, and spoiler alert if you haven't, I'll give you a second to fast forward. But the fifth film is actually a prequel to the franchise, which ends with Molly and Sam boarding their flight to Paris on the inevitable Flight 180. We see Alex and the others from Final Destination 1 successfully get off the plane due to Alex having his premonition, but Sam and Molly realize what's going on a little too late and the plane explodes. Which, if I must say so myself, was one of the best twists in a horror franchise because audiences had no idea that this movie acted as a prequel, and it was honestly just chef's kiss. I remember watching it in the theaters and being like, what the hell? The marketing, the anything that came out about the movie really only proved to be the next installment of it and never showed any signs of it tying back to the original series. And like, I don't know, it was just, I remember being there and you get to the end of the film and it's kind of like, okay, throughout the whole thing you don't really realize that he's talking about going to Paris for this job, and that's where Final Destination 1 was going to take place, with everyone boarding the Flight 180 to get to Paris for their school trip. And it all just seems like a coincidence at first because the films do a great job of always throwing in, 180 and certain little Easter eggs back to the first film, but you just kind of take it with a grain of salt. It's just like, oh, they're just talking about the first movie and kind of playing into fan service of always going back to the first one of where everything started. But to actually see Alex and the original cast of people kind of reacting in that moment from a different point of view on the plane, it was so interesting and it was so fun. And while I don't love the fifth movie, I do think that it was very clever on how they tied it back into leading into the whole beginning, and it really standing as a prequel to the Final Destination series but also being a fifth installment in the franchise, because like I said, throughout the whole movie you really have no idea that it's going to end up being where everything begins. And it was also interesting to see that the plot and everything kind of extends beyond where we first meet Alex and his friends. So to start it out with, two people and a group of people that have no ties to Alex and everybody else, I don't know, it was really, really interesting and it was really cool. It was definitely a lot of fun. I'm not very big on 3D movies. I think they give me a headache. The glasses are annoying to wear, but I remember watching that one in 3D and being very like, whoa, like this is cool, everything flying at you, and it wasn't overdone. It made a lot of sense. And admittedly, I don't think many people watch these movies for their plot lines or the stories of the characters, being that you don't really spend much time with them before they get killed off. You have the beginning opening scene where we're introduced to everyone, but throughout the story of the film, you don't really spend a lot of time with them as far as character growth. But we do have beloved characters like Clear from Final Destination 2 and Wendy from Final Destination 3 who have kind of become iconic figures in the horror genre, despite the grim fate that awaits them in each installment. While some may argue that the franchise lacks character growth, it's undeniable that the creative death sequences are what keep fans coming back for more. It's honestly gotten to the point where that's really all some fans want to see: who dies and how. And I'm actually very curious to see what deaths await the new set of characters, and if it will also have any immediate connection to the original films, or kind of be an entity of its own. If I'm correct, besides the Final Destination, this is the only film that doesn't have a number title in it. While it is considered Final Destination 6, it's not written out as Final Destination 6 Bloodlines. It's just Final Destination Bloodlines. So I'm very curious to see if it's gonna connect in any way, as Final Destination did 5 with the connection to Final Destination 1. So I'm excited. With Final Destination Bloodlines on the horizon, production has actually just begun on the new film. Speculation is running rampant about what's in store for the 6th installment. There are some quote-unquote leaks that suggest a new storyline focusing on a young woman named Stephanie who's haunted by recurring premonitions of a devastating fire that threatens her entire family. If I'm correct, there is also in the leaks suggested that her grandmother had suffered from premonitions but was able to escape death's design, and now this is where the whole Bloodlines title comes into play, with it being passed down to Stephanie and her having the gift of premonitions and then having to save her family is sort of the new thing, right? The new formula, whereas we're not really focusing on just a random group of friends or a random group of people that happen to be tied in some way as like being schoolmates or working at the same job. So I'm curious to see whether this will mark a departure from the previous formula, which obviously remains to be seen. But one thing's for sure, fans are definitely eager to see what fresh horrors await. Personally, I'm rooting for the rumored storyline involving first responders being hunted down by death itself. It's a clever twist that promises to breathe new life into the franchise, exploring the juxtaposition of those who fight death for a living, now fighting for their own lives. This was something that had leaked a while ago, and I say leaked very loosely because leaked implies that it's coming from the studio or people involved in the project, and it's not. I think at this point everything's very much speculation. But if we're going on that and kind of comparing the two storylines that are being speculated, where we have Stephanie and her family and trying to save her family from this fire or whatever the case may be, to the speculation of the storyline following first responders, I would much rather see the characters be first responders and people who fight death every day, right? So you have EMTs, you have police officers, you have firefighters, and these people who are kind of thrown into death's design on a day-to-day basis for their job take on death, and really them be the people who now need help from someone, but who do you go to for help when you are the help? That kind of thing. So I would actually prefer to see that. I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be something that's not been done before in the franchise. And I think it would be kind of cool to see, let's say, a firefighter. He or she is called to the scene, and they are needed in some way where they think this person's life is on the line, and in reality, it's just death setting them up for their own death. I don't know. I think there's something really interesting, and there's very much a storyline there, and I think it would be something that a lot of people also aren't expecting, but also rooting it in realism and kind of bringing the series to a more realistic setting and plot line where we have real people with real jobs that we all know that are facing these untimely deaths and these moments where, you know, they're supposed to be the hero, but now they need someone to kind of help them. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling with that, but to sum it up, and in case in point, I think I would prefer that. I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be cool. I think there's a lot of ways to put death's design into people who fight death every day. That's just me, though. Let me know if you agree. If not, cool. I think the Stephanie storyline and her family and her grandmother having premonitions and it kind of being passed down through the generations and through the, quote unquote bloodlines is also pretty cool. I think it's different as well. We don't ever see our main character have a direct tie to why they're having these premonitions, or to say like, oh, well, grandma had this gift and everyone really just thought it was her being her, or your grandmother was a fortune teller or something like that, and then it coming around to circle back to the next generation, I think would be cool. And they always say that any gift in a family bloodline or something like that usually skips a generation. So it would make sense why grandma has the gift, mom doesn't, and then the daughter or the son does. And I think that that's something that can play into, the interest of people who are looking for that, right? But I don't know. I think I would much rather see the series ground itself more in a little bit of realism, because the deaths are so extreme and unexpected and kind of out of this world, to where I think the plot following something more based in realism and reality would give a good contrast to what we see on the screen. I definitely rambled on way longer than I wanted to about that. But yeah, I think that's the storyline I'm rooting for more so. And I do kind of hope that we get that. Like, I remember when the speculation started, I was like, hell yeah. Like, let's get that going. Let's get people writing that. Let's get something a little more scary, in the sense of you never know when you take this job that it could ultimately lead to your death. And I think that's something that a lot of people discuss and talk about, and why a lot of people stay away from those types of jobs as first responders. And then you have the few people that do, put their life on the line without really thinking or realizing that this can also end my life. Saving someone's life can be the end of me as well. So yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of into that more than the grandma had premonitions and now Nina has premonitions kind of thing. Yeah. Let's also not forget about the potential return of Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character, Wendy. Now, this is very much just fan service and fan stuff that people want to see. I think Wendy is very much beloved and is one of the bigger characters in the series when you think of Final Destination, because I know that, I've asked around and I've done my research, as most say, into what people's favorite film in the franchise is, which one they constantly not overwatch, but they constantly go back to and watch. And a lot of people like Final Destination 3 the most, and paired with the original, of course. I think the first three, Final Destination 1, 2, and 3, are where the series really lies for people, and where many people spend their time rewatching. Now, it's not to say that 4 and 5 are bad, but I think there's just something that's, one, nostalgic about the first three because of the time that they were released. It was the early 2000s, And I think a lot of people hold that time period to heart. I know I do myself. I am was born in the 90s, so the 2000s are when I was really, growing up, and then I was a kid and a young teen, or whatever the case may be. And I think because of that, we hold everything in those time periods so close to heart because it feels like childhood. And I know that's why for me, the first three movies are definitely my favorite, with the third one being my absolute favorite. I actually asked my partner last night, and I was like, when you think about Final Destination, what do you think of? He's like, the one with the roller coaster. That's it. That's the one. That's the one that I love. I don't really think about the other ones. And I've noticed that with a lot of people as I've asked around and really kind of tried to figure out where Final Destination as a franchise stands with people, and it's really in the first three. And so while her fate seemed kind of sealed in Final Destination 3, there's always room for speculation, especially for diehard fans like myself, who can't resist the allure of a beloved legacy character making a surprise comeback. And I think legacy characters and requels, as we've named them, where we, bring back the OGs from the previous installment into the new age and modern versions of these stories, which, and this is totally off rail and totally off topic, but I was just scrolling through Instagram before I started recording this episode, and I'm not really sure if it's real yet. I mean, it's on her official Instagram page, but Neve Campbell has posted the script for Scream 7 and says she's back as Sidney Prescott. And I think that for me, as I'm talking about legacy characters and requels and sequels to remakes and reboots, whatever the hell you want to call them, that instantly had me excited for the next film. And I'm still very upset with it because of what happened to Melissa Barrera, but I mean, it's Sidney fucking Prescott, right? Like, how do you not get excited when you see that Neve Campbell could be back? And I think that's something that would really do the Final Destination series justice, because we had already the fan favorite from Final Destination 1, which was Clear, come back for Final Destination 2, right? I think since then, if I'm correct, no other character from a previous film besides, the coroner, who is the key to everything and kind of is there for the group and tells them about Death's design and everything like that. No one's ever come back. And I think it would be not only great fan service, being that Final Destination 3 is the big one for a lot of people, but I think it would be so fun to play into the whole bringing someone back, giving them a new story, while also keeping to the core of what made their story in the first one. And I think why everyone liked Wendy so much was because she was very relatable. She was a teenager, and I think she very much fit the teenage, I don't want to say stereotype, but, she was young, she was naive, but she also had her moments where she stood up and she was able to make these decisions that a lot of people couldn't make, or she was able to think quickly on her feet. And she's also just beautiful. Mary Elizabeth Winstead, especially in horror. I mean, 10 Cloverfield Lane, Final Destination 3. I feel like I think she was in a Death Proof, which was a Grindhouse movie. Yeah, I think it would be something that a lot of people would like. And in reality, I mean, we never really see her get hit by that oncoming train. We've explicitly seen or even read about in the following movies about the previous final girl or boy's deaths, but Wendy's was never mentioned in Final Destination 4 or really any movie after that. I think Final Destination 3 just kind of was what it was, and then never tied into any of the other films except for Final Destination 5, which I just saw last night. There's a scene where, God, I forgot, Olivia, she's the one that dies by like the laser eye thing. They find a picture of her, and she's actually, it's at the theme park where Final Destination 3 takes place. and it's her and her friend, and they're about to get on the Devil's Flight. And that was something that was interesting because if I'm correct, it's the only tie to the Final Destination 3 movie that we ever see. I do know that producer Craig Perry has stated that while Wendy, Kevin, and Julie's deaths from Final Destination 3 are never specifically mentioned, he quotes that they are most likely dead. But unfortunately for people like myself, most likely is not actually. So I have hope that she somehow removed her leg at the very last second from the rubble of the train crash and, rolled out of the way of the oncoming train. But that's just me being a diehard Wendy stan. That's nothing really solidified. I think that's just me wanting to see the actress and the character brought back to the screen, being that we were never given an explicit viewing or actual telling of what happened to them. Now, as for death sequences, Final Destination has never shied away from delivering some of the most inventive and gruesome demises in horror history. We have tanning beds to nail guns. Each film raises the bar for shock and horror, leaving audiences wondering what twisted scenarios await them in Final Destination 6. And since there's been no solid plot synopsis released as of yet, fans have really nothing to go on or even speculate as to what kind of horrific death sequences we will see on the silver screen. I think when we get something that says, this film will follow XYZ to XYZ, and then they're going to have to survive, I think we start to speculate and really get into the groove of like, okay, well, if it's, let's just say the first responders, right? Like if it's an EMT worker who has to, give someone a shock to bring them back to life, is there going to be a moment where that person's body is a little too wet and they, it backfires and now they're burned alive or they're electrocuted to death? I think when you get the synopsis and you get more information on it, we're able to make assumptions about what's to come, but there's no real information on it yet besides, I forget who on the crew posted the chair, like the director's chair or something. And that's really all that we have so far about the film being in production. There's no cast yet, if I'm correct. There's no plot, there's no setting. So everything has been real silent and very hush-hush, but as always, the fans are speculating what's happening and kind of trying to pull from the air what the new movie's going to be about, which I tend to do here and there, but I more so like to wait until we get more information. Nonetheless, I am excited and looking forward to seeing one who's casted. I'm a sucker for cast. I think the cast can really make or break how the film will do. Now, that's not to say that I think they should go with an all-star cast where everyone's going to know who's who. I do believe in giving the next generation and newer up-and-coming actors chances to get their big breaks, but I do think, which is why I mentioned Wendy, at least having one or two kind of big names or OG characters come back in whatever way that they can will definitely help the production value and really help people want to go see the movie, because we all want to know what happens. And when you have such an open death, or an open ending I should say, like Final Destination 3, where everyone kind of like, okay, well, I mean, her leg was stuck and there was an oncoming train coming at her at whatever miles an hour, it's highly unlikely that she got out, but we don't ever see it. And now, yes, there's an alternate ending, if I'm correct. I think there was an alternate ending. I know I had the DVD and I watched it like a million times, which was actually really cool because you get to make choices during the film, which tweak the film not much at all. You're not able to save anyone in the movie. Everyone still meets the death that they met, in the original film. But it was interesting to give people the opportunity to make a choice in a movie that seems so set in a design, Death's design. And I think, if I'm correct, the alternate ending, we actually do see Wendy get hit by the train, and her body obviously explodes on impact because the train is coming at her so fast. But, and in the released version, which is the theatrical version, which is the only version that I ever considered canon in the series, for me, whatever is shown to audiences in the theater is all we can go by. Deleted scenes, bonus scenes, extras, alternate endings, alternate beginnings, none of that really can be considered canon to the franchise if it's not what everyone sees. Because not everyone buys the DVD. Not everyone goes down the YouTube rabbit hole of, oh, this is a deleted scene. This scene was supposed to be this way. And with that, I still have to say that Wendy's death is open-ended. Speaking of untapped potential, though, I can't help but wonder why a cruise ship setting has never been explored on the big screen. There is a comic book adaptation of Final Destination titled Final Destination Spring Break, which offered a tantalizing glimpse into the horrors of a doomed cruise, and I, for one, would love to see that translated into a future installment of the series. If you haven't read the comics, which I don't think many people have, they follow a group on a cruise ship for spring break, but ultimately they escape that initial sequence and find themselves cheating death in Mexico. For me, I thought it was fun. I thought it was different. I thought it was unique. I feel like the settings of the movies generally take place in like a city or a small suburban town, whatever the case may be, but to see it translated into going abroad and going somewhere outside of that general setting, for me personally, was a lot of fun. And I remember I remember reading the comic books when I was younger and just being like, why isn't this a movie? Like, this was a lot better than what we were getting in some ways, because it removed the typical setting. It showed that death follows you wherever you go. It doesn't really matter. And I actually think there were some of the best death designs that I've seen within the franchise. There's a moment where the group goes parasailing and someone dies like that. And I'm not really one for spoilers, because I feel like when people find out about things, so whoever listens to this will say, oh, whoa, there's a Final Destination comic book. Let me go try to find it. Let me go read it. So I'm not going to spoil anything, but I think the setting of a cruise ship, the setting of taking it to Mexico was really interesting and fun. And I would love to see that translated onto screen, because the formula seems very, I don't want to say cliche, but I will say cliche. A group of people, small town, small city, big city, whatever the case may be, but it's always been set in these known places. And so I think that's why I like the comic book version so much, because it pulled us into a different culture even, and a different world. And I think a lot of audiences would like to see that. I know I would. And I thought it was fun to be, in Mexico. I love Mexico. I've been there a couple times. And to see them uncover the secrets of death design due to a fortune teller, which plays more into the whole premonition aspect, and it being something more supernatural than just saying it's supernatural and just saying, oh, well, it's death design. It is what it is. There's a way to the world, and if you break it, it comes back around. If you die when you're supposed to die, then everything stays in order. I think the fortune teller, taking it to Mexico, giving it that sort of supernatural aspect, made it a little more scary. I see why the films won't do it, because it does pull it from the realism of death just being death, and death having the design that it has, and you're supposed to die when you're supposed to die. If you don't, you mess up the order, death gets even more pissed off, and now it's coming back tenfold. So I get it, but I would truly love to see the series explore more lore within other cultures and settings. So while Bloodline seems unlikely to explore that just yet, I do have hope for it to be a plot in the future, and I think it should. In the end, while some may dismiss the Final Destination series as mere spectacle, for fans like myself, it's a thrilling journey into the darkest corners of fate and mortality. As production ramps up for the new film, I can't help but feel a shiver of anticipation, eagerly awaiting the next chapter in this spine-chilling saga. I think we're going to wrap up there. That's all for this week's episode for the final pod. Before I go, I did want to give an update on some exciting merchandise announcements. I've officially designed the show's logo, which you can see on the podcast page, as well as on the Instagram. I have decided to create a limited line of t-shirts and trucker hats, so if you're looking to rock some final merch, stay tuned for more information coming soon. I have already partnered with someone to actually create the styles and to put them from paper to shirt and hat. I just have to make some purchase orders, and then I'm in the process of also designing a website which will have, the merch and yeah, but it'll be very limited. It'll be only a couple pieces. It'll only be shirts and trucker hats for now. Kind of see how the demand goes for that. And then we'll see what we expand to. Be sure to follow the Instagram page again at The Final Pod for more announcements on new episodes, what's to come, as well as merch updates. Until next time, everyone, remember, always stay spooky.